Welcome to Only Ghosts in the Building. This is your host, Emily Claire, and
Karen Lynn.
We got some extra woo today.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Bellevue Hall, which is actually on the property of Bellevue State Park, which is owned by the state of Delaware.
Yes.
Now.
Yes.
But it has a long and very interesting kind of a history.
There's lots of sordid things coming up in this one.
I know. It's kind of boring for the most part, but there's some, especially if you're a Delaware native, it's kind of interesting things you may not know or have read about previously.
Right.
Bellevue Hall was originally called Woolton Hall, Woolton Hall, and there's a reason for that. Built in 1855 by Hanson Robinson.
Hanson Robinson.
Right. So this isn't really important.
Oh, the Robinson House up off of Philadelphia Pike.
That could
where
be.
The
Yeah, you're
where
right.
it goes, where it turns from Philadelphia Pike onto Naaman's.
To 92. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
it's
Robinson
right on the
House.
house. I never put that together before.
Me neither, till just now.
Yeah,
I was today years
wonder
old.
if
Anyway.
Could be.
Hanson
that's it.
Robinson.
So it was built on the property of three different farms, the Orr, Grubb, and Stevenson's family's farms.
And we knew Grubb, because Grubb Road.
Grubb Road. Hanson Robinson was born in 1815. So
He was built.
He was built. Yeah,
He
they had been built too. So he was born in 1815, but it was built in 1855.
Okay.
And why did he build it? Don't know, but he liked the property because it sits up and he could get a view of the Delaware River.
Yeah.
He was
It's on a hill.
successful wool merchant in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
Made lots of money. And I guess he bought the property and built this Gothic revival style castle, including turrets and everything.
Turrets?
It was a beautiful stone castle.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, pictures of it.
I'll post a picture of it. It's really cool.
And he and his
you
wife,
imagine?
Anne, lived there and named it Woolton Hall. So they're Woolton.
Imaginative.
Yes. So the theory is
I rolled my eyes.
he liked it there because he could see the Delaware River. At that point, there weren't trees or anything blocking his view. He could sit out on one of his turrets, I guess, and watch the river traffic. And when he'd see his ship bringing his wool into
Philadelphia.
Yeah, he'd get on his horse and ride in and meet the ship. So that's the story anyway. So it was a dark stone castle, and it had several towers, and then it just sat there for a while. So he liked it. He lived there. It was like he came out of Philadelphia. It was his respite, I guess, of, kind of getting out of the city.
I mean, back in the day, that would have been really nice. Not a lot of neighbors.
Yes, and he liked that a lot.
Yeah.
So he wanted to be
Privacy.
part of the community. He liked being like, here, look at my castle, because it's kind of sitting up in an area where people going by could
wasn't
see it.
Philadelphia Pike was the way to get up because 95
that was one of the way.
built.
Yeah, there was no 95. Philadelphia Pike, I guess, was one way. Was probably like a dirt track back in those days. But also, it was a big shipping channel. Delaware River, Philly was a big shipping area.
Yes.
There was a big shipping channel, so all the ships could say, wow, look at that castle.
Yeah.
I guess that's mine. It's Woolton Hall. So it would have been fun to have that. That would really be fun. But things don't last forever, and he died in 1817 at age 56. And his widow sold it to another shipping magnate, Clark R. Griggs. Griggs. And he kept the hall intact. The only thing he did is put in a carriage house because he liked his collection of antique carriages.
Okay.
So he kind of added on to that.
But it was still a huge, huge property. Just one castle and one carriage house.
In one carriage house.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was a big size piece of property.
It's huge.
Yeah.
The park is
and it had
enormous.
been farmland, so there probably weren't a lot of trees and a lot of stuff going on there at that point. But I did see his obituary.
Griggs.
Hanson Robinson's.
Oh, Hanson Robinson's.
Yes.
Okay.
There's not a lot of information I
About
found
Griggs.
on Clark Griggs.
Okay.
And I didn't think he had it that long, so, or he wasn't that notable, I guess, in Delaware history, so there wasn't a lot I found on him.
Mm-hmm.
But something interesting that I found, it says in this obituary, he was a man of great force of character, a remarkably successful merchant, and a genial gentleman.
Who lived in a freaking castle.
Yes.
A Gothic castle.
Gothic style.
Wait until you see the picture. It's so cool.
Yes. Mr. Robinson was a liberal in his political and religious opinions, a friend of reform and reformers. So he was a little progressive, I guess, right? Yeah. And was at the time of his death one of the managers of the Delaware Association for the Improvement and Education of the Colored People,
That's awesome.
in the objects of which he always felt a warm interest.
Shout out Robinson.
Yeah.
Good job.
So I didn't know there was a Delaware Association for the Improvement and Education of Colored People, but apparently there was, and he was right in with it.
Yeah. Well,
So-
and that goes with, we're in the Quaker area, so that kind of
that's
goes
right.
with
He
our...
did. It did say he was born of Quaker parentage.
Yeah.
So that's
People are people, no matter what color.
he was in the wool and sheepskin business.
Yeah.
Yeah. His widow sold Woolton Hall to
Griggs.
Griggs,
And then Griggs was like, nothing.
well, Griggs was. I mean, he was a something.
Yeah,
I
because he
just
had a
don't
lot
know
of money to
about
buy a
him.
castle, but yeah.
I didn't know a lot about him. So now we get into a lot of DuPont history, and for locals,
DuPont.
we used to call them DuPonts, because there were so many.
Yeah, there's a lot of DuPont.
Oh, you work for
This is-
DuPonts
Yeah.
because there were so many plants around there. or
Now,
things.
Mom used to work at DuPont. My stepdad used to work at DuPont. My dad used to work at DuPont. It's huge.
And your
here.
grandfather
And my
worked-
grandfather. And I've actually worked on 2 sites of DuPont doing other things.
as contractor. right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's huge. It's huge around here. And they were the money.
They started in gunpowder from France. It was E.I. DuPont.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to really mangle the names because they're French names.
Spell it.
I can't.
We'll get to it later.
We'll get to it later. E.I. DuPont is what we always say. Irene is the I. That one is easy.
Yeah.
So
The
they were a
Ignatius.
French family that came over and started gunpowder business.
Mm-hmm.
They made lots of money. They developed smokeless gunpowder, which was, I guess, kind of a good thing because you're not inhaling.
Yeah. Now, didn't the Shipleys also do that, or the Bringhursts? Doesn't that tie
they
into?
had a mill. They had
Okay,
mills.
they didn't.
No, they were separate.
But the DuPonts did come over to Rockwood to hang out and have lunch.
I didn't know that.
I do know that because they did say that the DuPonts would come over.
I would guess that would be
Yeah.
in society during the Bringhurst
Yeah.
era.
Right,
after
right,
the
right.
later era.
With
Because they were, Shipley Bringhurst were there long before DuPont
Yeah.
showed up.
yeah.
I think DuPont came over in 1802 or something like that. So they were fairly new. They were nouveau riche. They were
Okay.
the new kids in town and not the old money.
But they brought the gunpowder.
But they brought money too. So they came over. They brought their technology. He was the chemist. E.I. was a chemist, and they developed what's now the experimental station on 141. And,
which I have never been to
oh, well,
because you're not allowed to go on site.
unless you have business there.
Yeah, and my only business was you or Dad.
Well, Dad, yeah, he was there
He
for a
was
while.
there for a little while.
Yeah, he was there when I met him. He worked there.
But that place is sealed up tight.
Yes, you have to have access, so you just can't wander in. When
Yes.
it was a gunpowder factory, they had these buildings along the Brandywine River, which isn't real big. It's not very
No.
wide at that point. And they build these little places into the rock.
Isn't it
these
granite?
buildings, yes,
Yeah.
making the gunpowder in these little buildings along the Brandywine, and if they had an explosion, the back of the building, which was wooden, would blow off and blow them into the Brandywine. That was their original safety program.
That's cool. So they would go in the water instead of getting like smashed in the rocks.
Or
Cool.
be encased in this building.
Yeah.
So I don't know how often that happened, but that was their original safety program.
Oh my goodness.
I think it's got a little bit better after that, but we digress.
But multiple times.
Yes.
Always.
We're digressing all over the place.
1893.
William DuPont Sr., which was one of the children of the original DuPonts. I guess, in all of their brood, because there were tons of them.
The DuPonts.
The DuPonts bought the estate, and then he put in other buildings on the property, including barns and horse stables, because he was into horses.
Which they still have barns, and they still have lots of horses.
Yeah, they do. It's really
so cool.
pretty. It's a nice place. It really is. And they maintained it. It doesn't have everything they originally had, like the swimming pool. Well, we'll get to that. Swimming pools and tennis courts. But so he was in the family, and he worked actually in different positions within different branches.
Who are we talking about?
We're talking about Senior. William DuPont Sr.
DuPont Sr.
Yes. He was the youngest son of General Henry DuPont and his wife, Louisa.
Oh, that's where Henry comes from. Okay.
Yes, Henry DuPont is a big name, and I think that is Winneter is Henry DuPont's estate.
Yeah. And we haven't talked about Pierre. Is Pierre his brother or his nephew, Senior?
I didn't remember how
but
all
that's
the families are connected.
But that's Longwood.
Longwood.
Yeah.
It was Pierre. Now, there's a Pierre DuPont that was the governor of the state, and that's Brantwyn on Rockland Road. So, and was his childhood home.
Okay.
And that was an interesting estate, too.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and that's a golf course now?
No, it's still an estate. It's an event place where you can do weddings.
But isn't there a golf course right next to it?
Across is the DuPont golf course.
Okay. I'm remembering a golf course.
DuPont Country Club, DuPont Golf Course, DuPont everything. DuPont apparently owns the most land in the state of Delaware still, although Grenoble, which is one of the DuPont estates, I can't remember who owned that.
Oh, the one that just got sold, right?
Actually, they sold it to Longwood Gardens, who was Pierre's estate.
Yes.
So that's all connected now.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be exciting to see what they do with that.
Because we're like Delaware and Pennsylvania area. Like it's
it's
spreads
northern
out.
Delaware. When you go into northern Delaware, it gets a little hilly. It's kind of beautiful estates.
It's Biden country.
He has a house now in Greenville, which is kind of not the same. No. So you can't compare it. I mean, he's not DuPont money. So
no, he's just presidential money.
Well, now, yes. He is in Delaware. He does have a small estate there, I guess, a house. Well, a big house.
Yeah, compared to our...
But we're talking about huge.
Yeah.
Like Rockwood and the DuPonts, they all had, Shipley and Bringhurst, they all were nature lovers. Mm-hmm. They all developed properties to horticultural type properties. Mount Cuba was
Mount Cuba's crazy.
Winter's huge. Longwood Gardens is like world famous. People.
Hagley
is where they keep most of the records. So DuPont made all their money in gunpowder. Mm-hmm. They even owned at one point. They owned Remington, which made
the gun people.
Yeah.
Remington Steel.
Remington Farms was in Virginia. It was a place in Virginia where they would go to have big meetings. Just remembering things coming out of my brain. So
that could be scary.
So Senior built buildings on this estate, and he was, big time. He was in the DuPont manufacturing. He was part of the Repauno Chemical Company, which was Lamont DuPont, which is his cousin, wanted to get into explosive. They didn't want it in Delaware where the gunpowder was.
Yeah.
So now it's too dangerous here. Take it across to New Jersey.
So Repauno, which is also
Near Gibbstown, New Jersey.
is also now a DuPont site.
Well, it used to be a DuPont site,
Yeah,
and I
but
still it kind of is, but
Right.
that's had many transformations.
Yeah.
But originally it was an explosives factory, so
Okay.
they would build, instead of like the shelters they built along the Brandywine.
Mm-hmm.
They built bunkers, like under the ground. They tunneled out these bunkers, and they do their experiments there. And Lamont DuPont, which is one of the cousins,
Lamont
DuPont actually was killed there in a runaway explosion.
A runaway explosion.
And it says his ghost still haunts the area.
I want to go.
Yes, it's all
Let's go
back in
meet
the
him.
woods. I've been there. I wasn't like ghost hunting at that point, but
Yeah.
I saw the bunkers, and they're sort of like big mounds.
Yeah.
Now you can't really distinguish them too much, except you can see they're a mound and they're all grass. And
Do you
weeds
have
and
the
stuff.
inn? Can we get there?
I don't anymore. Used to.
Where's your people?
'Cause
Are they
that
all
was
retired?
One of my one of my jobs years ago was to go over there and do water quality stuff.
Yeah.
So I got a tour, which was very interesting. But I digress yet again. So he took over some of the stuff after Lamont was killed, and he was also friends with his cousin Alfred I.
AI?
So AI is now Nemours Hospital for Children. It used to be AI DuPont.
Yes, that's how we know. We know. We're going to take the kid over to AI. We're going to go to AI. That's what we used to say.
Because it was always called AI.
Yeah,
And it was, so that, they have a beautiful estate.
Nemours is amazing.
So Alfred I, William DuPont Sr., and
William
Lamont
DuPont Sr.
were all-
and Lamont.
were all kind of outcasts.
So they're the rebels.
They were the rebels, the black sheep of the family, I guess.
Well, that's cool. You could have 3 black sheep.
Yeah, they all kind of hung out. They started Delaware Trust together. That was like a big banking when I was young.
Yeah.
Everybody banked at Delaware Trust. Lamont was killed. AI married a divorcee, was estranged from the family because of that.
Yeah.
And he actually built, if you remember, there's that big stone wall surrounding the
Yeah.
estate and now the hospital
Yeah.
that has glass on top. And apparently that was his statement back to the rest of the family.
Like,
saying,
get out. And
You,
you can't even climb over because you'll get ripped up.
you can't reject me because I reject you
Yes.
first.
Yeah.
And you can't come into my estate because there's glass all over the walls. So when I actually worked at AI DuPont Hospital when it was just a small building. His wife, Jessie Ball DuPont, the divorcee that he married that created the big rift, was actually, with her will, left money for the hospital to be built.
Oh, that's great.
So it was originally a small building when I worked there. It was just, but they built the new hospital right behind it.
It's huge.
And now they keep adding on to it.
Yeah.
And then the state of Florida said, well, because you've made your money, apparently Jessie's family made her money, and Alfred was involved in Florida in the railroad business. They made tons of money. Florida said, well, we want some of that too. Contested the will.
Okay.
And so there is actually Nemours in Jacksonville. When you drive through Jacksonville on the way down to Disney, there's a big Nemours hospital there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And in addition, they said, well, we think the will says, apparently it originally said for children or seniors,
Oh,
senior citizens.
interesting.
And the state of Delaware took him to court and said, well, we think it's both. So now there's like a senior where people can go get eyeglasses and hearing aids and things like that.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that either.
Yeah. So,
And we've
that
been there
happened.
with Jonas many times.
well, it's not in there. They keep it as a separate
Yeah.
facility. I think it's across the road now.
Right.
Used to be downtown.
One of the best things I like about them, it was right there. I mean, since it's such a progressive and big, huge children's hospital, a lot of people come from all over, and that McDonald's has a McDonald's house.
Ronald McDonald's house.
Right there.
Where they can stay for free.
Yeah. So we're pretty lucky because that's our, our go-to ER.
So it used to be an orthopedic hospital. And when I worked there...
There's a plane again.
Mr. Rogers came.
Mr. Rogers?
He came to visit.
Did he take off his sweater and change it? He put on another sweater and shoes?
He went and talked to the kids, and nobody was allowed to really be around because he didn't want a lot of, non-kid things there. But that was an orthopedic hospital at that point, so it was really, came in, little kids that, it was bad.
Yeah.
Kids suffered, but they were undergoing treatment. But it was nice that he came and visited, and he requested a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch.
Oh,
Isn't that cute?
Yeah, I love Mr. Rogers.
So, anyway, we again digress.
I digress.
The estate of Alfred, there's a huge mansion and property, and again, horticultural stuff all around there, and it's really beautiful. Getting back to William Sr., he did his thing. He got into horse and cattle breeding. They bought Delaware Trust. William and his cousin Alfred bought Delaware Trust. He managed the other companies having to do with explosives. So there was Hercules, which is another place around here, and then a torpedo company. I don't know anything about the torpedo company and whether it's even around here. But
so they just wanted to blow things up.
Really? I mean...
you got gunpowder, you got explosives, then you got torpedoes.
Smokeless gunpowder, which made a bunch of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the explosives. And now there's other things that he's associated with. But he just kind of got involved with a lot of things.
Blowing things up with the boys.
So in 1878, he married his cousin May Lamont DuPont.
Ew.
So, yeah, I don't know how close of a cousin she was,
but still,
was she the sister of Lamont, or because her name's May Lamont DuPont? I don't know. So I don't know anything about. Although the age would have put her more as a sister rather than a daughter or something of Lamont. It was been his sister or a cousin, because again, names kind of float through the family.
Yeah. So this is Senior marrying May.
So he married May. Senior married May in 78, and then they divorced in 82. So he actually moved to South Dakota to divorce her. He had to have a residency of 6 months to get the divorce.
So they didn't have any kids, which is probably a good thing.
Maybe so.
Because they were cousins.
Because they're cousins.
So, growing up here, we always hear about the inbreeding of the
DuPont family. Yeah, and that's really true, because they did try to marry in to keep the wealth in the family. That was really important to them. Yeah. So, yes, that was true. So William DuPont married May Lamont DuPont, who was the daughter of Victor DuPont. So I don't know
where Victor comes in.
I don't know who Victor's related to and where he plays out on the...
Okay. Well, then they get divorced anyway.
They get divorced in 92. Married in 78, divorced in 92. He spent 1892. Did I say 1992?
No, you said no. You just said 92. But I just wanted to reiterate that it is not this.
He went to South Dakota, which used to... Later, it was like Nevada, because everybody went to Reno to get divorced. So he's apparently then, that time it was in South Dakota, you could do a 6-month residency to get your divorce. Don't know the reasons. Have no idea.
Maybe because they couldn't have kids together, because they were cousins.
I don't know. Or
whatever.
Maybe he fell in love with somebody else. Because he came back from South Dakota and married Annie Rogers Zinn, who was the daughter of a locomotive maker, Theodore Rogers. And then she was a divorced wife of George Zinn of Newcastle, Delaware.
Okay.
So she was a divorcee. That automatically put him on the outs with his family. Because
he's a divorcee, she's a divorcee. Didn't she have a kid?
She did. She had a son.
Yeah.
So it was not only marrying a divorcee, but marrying a divorcee with a son.
Yeah.
So William and Annie, alienated by the DuPont family and Wilmington society.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just their family, but
Yeah.
all
Everybody.
Wilmington society, whatever that consisted of at that time, left the United States and settled in Europe for 10 years. So
Yeah.
they skedaddled.
Or were run out. They got run out of
Well,
the
they're
society.
no longer in society, so I guess they wouldn't have been going to
Yeah.
Rockwood for dinners.
No, maybe not. Miss
But-
Mary wouldn't have been
but-
hosting them.
But they still owned Bellevue,
Yeah.
or Woolton Hall it was called then. So
Yeah.
they still owned Woolton. Woolton didn't really live there. They left, lived in Europe. And they had 2 children, Marion, William Jr.
And William.
William Jr. So Marion's the older, William's the son.
And
A
then,
couple years after.
but George.
And then
Georgie
George was
before them.
George
is
Zinn.
oldest.
Yeah, he was born in 83 and William was born in 1896. They purchased a home in Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
which happened to be Montpelier, which was owned by the 4th president of the United States, James Madison, and his wife Dolly Madison.
Well, hello, Dolly.
Yeah. So they moved there in 1902. So when they came back, they didn't come back to the area, although they still owned Bellevue. They went to Montpelier and lived there.
Right.
So the kids grew up in Montpelier.
Yeah.
And
I feel like everybody has that. If you've gone through history class, you know what it looks like.
right,
It's
yeah,
that
you
big
see it, that big
place
down
with
in
the big
Virginia.
with the big columns.
Yeah, on the river and overlooking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that they moved there. They got involved in horse breeding and cattle breeding. I guess that's when he got involved in all of that
In Virginia.
in Virginia. He used to judge horse shows and all of that stuff. So he financed some of the prizes and awards. He was a member of various hunting, yachting, and social clubs. So I guess Virginia embraced him.
Yeah.
Wilmington said, "See ya."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, that's okay because I liked Virginia better."
After his 10-year stint in Europe.
He was also a member of the American Game Protective and Propagation Association, which again, I didn't know there was such a thing, but and then he worked to support the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918.
Oh.
I don't know why you have to have a treaty with migratory birds, but there you go. He died in 1928 in his estate at Altima near Brunswick, Georgia. So
Okay.
Brunswick is
So they went
just,
even lower.
just north of the Florida state line. If you've driven
Okay.
down 95,
Yeah.
you go through Brunswick.
I've driven down 95 with you
And
multiple times.
his wife Annie had died the year earlier in London.
Okay, so now they got the kids.
So now we have the kids. The kids grow
Marion.
up in Virginia. They get involved.
George, Marion, and Willie.
Yeah,
Junior.
but George doesn't really. I don't think George lived very long.
Do you think he went back with his family, with his dad?
I don't think so. So George died in 1929, and William DuPont died in 28. So he only lived a year after his stepfather.
Oh.
So he wasn't very old when
Okay.
he died. So
Yeah.
that's not. William lived until 1965, and Marion lived until 1983. I think she was in her 90s.
1983?
Yeah, 1983.
All right.
So anyway, he died, and then of course, Junior inherited the estate. even
Willie
though-
Jr.
Yeah, now you would think Marion, being the oldest, would inherit, but
She's a
apparently
lady.
not, because that wasn't done.
Right.
And she actually really involved in horses and that whole thing as well.
Yeah, when we were at the tour, there's the trophy room where father and son and daughter all raced against each other, and they would always win. So there's all these trophies for the three of them.
They were really horse people. So getting back to Junior,
Yes. Willie Jr.
he was born in 1896 and died in 1965, and he was a businessman and banker
Banker at the Delaware.
and a prominent figure in the sport of thoroughbred horse racing.
So they go real deep in the horses.
Yeah, so, when he grew up, he and his sister horse, and then his dad got involved, and now he is really involved in it. And he developed and designed more than 20 racing venues.
Cool.
Including
Fair Hill, which is where we used
Maryland,
to live.
which was my backyard
Right.
growing up. Fair Hill was always, we used to call it Willie DuPont Estate. And he was actually called Willie. He wasn't called William, he was called Willie.
Yeah.
So we always talked about Willie DuPont.
Yeah.
It is now Fair Hill Nature Center, and it actually was Maryland and Pennsylvania across the Mason-Dixon line.
Yeah.
And now it's Fair Hill Nature Center. They have a racetrack.
Yeah.
Where they do the cart, what's the cart horses? I forget what that's called.
It's funny because I was just listening to our recording when we were doing the ghost tour, and you were asking the same thing in the basement.
I can never remember that.
Was trotting or something? That woman that was...
Yes, she knew what the word is.
She knew all about it, and
Yeah.
I just listened to it, so... If you need a reference, go listen
they'll
to that
figure it out.
evidence,
I don't
because
care.
it was right around the time that we got the knock on the wall.
So, yes.
And the cat ball goes off.
Did horse racing, they have a track, and Cecil County Fair is held there every year.
Yeah.
But
wasn't that the Scottish Fair too? The Scottish
yeah, they
stuff?
do. They have a Scottish games.
Yeah, the
called
Scottish games. Those were fun.
Yeah, it is.
Everybody walking around in kilts.
And then they throw these big logs up in the air. And it was crazy.
I remember the dancing too.
Yes, they did dancing. So, yeah, I guess they still have the Scottish games.
No, they do.
I hadn't thought about
they
that.
do. I haven't been, but I know people who have.
Marion became known for her contributions in horse racing, but then William really took off. In 1919, he married Jean Lister Austin.
Lister
Listeter.
Austin.
Austin was the last name, and she was famous. She was the daughter of a famous William Lister, who was a railroad baron at the Baldwin Locomotive Works. So he had big money. They both had big money, so it was the wedding of the century. Her dad gave them more than 600 acres of land as a wedding gift in Newtown, Pennsylvania. They called it Leicester Hall, and it was a 3-story Georgian mansion replica of Montpelier.
So that's Montpelier number 2.
They built this house look like Montpelier. So I guess they still had Montpelier. Now they have another Montpelier in Pennsylvania. But Bellevue was still a castle.
Yeah.
At that point.
The Gothic castle.
At that point, it was still a castle.
Yeah.
Because they didn't really live there. So they lived in Pennsylvania, and they built huge, of course, horse training facilities and barns. And in the meantime, he was then voted to be on the board of Delaware Trust Company, which is where his father was president before him. So kind of continued on there. So
they got divorced, but what I remember from our tour, when Declan was talking about it, he said that when they got divorced, he wanted his barn because it was like state-of-the-art barn.
Yes.
And it was huge. He was going to actually build one, and they were like, it's going to be too expensive. So he packed up the barn.
Piece by piece and rebuilt it. I remember that
and
story.
rebuilt it over here.
In Bellevue.
At Bellevue.
Well,
he was like, so I'm divorcing you and I'm taking the barn.
So he got the estate after his dad died. He got Bellevue. So he said, I don't like living in a castle. I want it to look like Montpelier. So he changed the whole thing.
Or the whole thing.
There's still some of the original
Yeah.
flooring and stuff, but it looks totally different. He took down the turrets where you could see. And he did a lot of planting because, of course, it was horticulture. And he put in these huge windows because he liked to look out.
Yeah.
But he put the trees around so people couldn't look in.
Yeah.
So it was the opposite of Woolton Hall, where it was a castle, and
he's like, do not look at us.
wanted
We're
to
up
look at
here
the Delaware, but I guess at that point,
doing our own thing.
DuPonts were becoming so famous that everybody wanted to gawk at them, I guess, they thought. So they put in these beautiful windows that are there now, which was interesting. They also had all the farmland.
Yeah.
So they had 4 children, 2 girls, 2 boys. Apparently, he left, went to Bellevue Hall,
Took his barn.
took his barn. She stayed there with the kids, although they visited, I guess.
Yeah.
They lived happily ever after, right?
No. No.
He actually got married again.
Uh-huh.
And his second wife's name was Margaret Osborne, and she was a tennis champion, and this was in 1947.
Big time.
So, in addition to all the horse stuff and barn and stuff, he built indoor and outdoor tennis courts for her.
And a tunnel.
And a tunnel to get there. And later, they even put in swimming pools and things. So during World War II, they didn't have the Olympics. She wanted to play tennis. So they actually held a U.S. Olympics on the estate,
It's so
on
crazy.
these tennis courts. And it was an actual Olympics, and they have the trophies and everything from
And they
there
brought
that you could
everybody
see.
in.
They brought everybody
paid
in.
for all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that
She
was
like,
a big thing.
I need to play tennis, but World War II and the Nazis.
I know. And so this was 47, right at the height of everything.
Yeah.
And then they had a son, William DuPont III.
Yes.
So he actually, the first two sons weren't named after him, but the third one, by his second wife, was.
Henry was named William Henry, and he dropped that. So we all know him as Henry now, but he was originally named William. This was from the tour. So they have some intel that wasn't in your
Yes, they did. But that
your
wasn't my
readings.
research.
But yeah, could you imagine being a William and your dad names your half brother
Half-brother, right?
William the Third, even though you were already William? Like, ugh,
Yeah, I know.
gross.
It's kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
So I
So
don't
that's
know
why
whether there were bad feelings or not
that's
around
why.
that,
Well,
but-
that's why he named himself Henry instead. He dropped the William. It's kind of like, I feel like him and Eddie Five would get along together.
You think?
They're like, we're changing our names.
Yes, we're going to Eddie 5. Went from Eddie 3 to Eddie 5. I don't know really anything more about
Them.
the third or the other children,
Well,
except for John.
Yeah,
and we'll get
we
to
know
him.
a lot about John.
We know a lot about John.
Too much about John.
Anyway, they got married. They had a kid. She was a tennis player and apparently world famous, and she traveled around. They divorced in 1964.
Right. So the secret side of that we learned in our ghost adventure was on the tour. They were talking at the investigation. They were saying that basement that had that really creaky staircase that we went down that was behind the panel.
Uh-huh.
So that was made into, where are we, Willie and Margaret.
Mm-hmm.
So Willie had made that up into like the hangout for the dudes,
Well,
like
wait-
where they would go
wait a second.
smoke
Before
cigars.
that, you want to talk about the tunnel. They
Well,
built
the tunnel. Yeah, they built the
to
tunnel.
be able to go to the tennis courts
Yes.
without getting wet.
Exactly.
So they didn't have to go out and be seen by the public. They could go through the tunnel and
Right.
end up at the tennis courts.
So she could have her little pathway
Right,
to the
yes.
tennis court. But they had made that underneath like a parlor for all the guys where they would go and smoke cigars. And that tunnel, apparently, he would bring women for all his menfolk down there. And we also want to talk about Margaret, that she
So-
also used it for salacious reasons.
Yeah, there is a
gossip.
rumor.
Gossip.
These are the rumors. So one of her, because she was such a famous tennis player.
Yeah, do you
she-
have the list of everything that she did?
Oh my gosh,
It was
yes,
amazing.
I do that. She was, Margaret Osborne DuPont was born, Margaret Evelyn Osborne in 1918.
AKA baddest bitch ever.
Yeah, she was #1 American female tennis player.
Yes.
Really good. So she won all these doubles and grand slams and all this stuff. That was even despite not being able to go to the Australian championships.
Yeah. Right. She wanted to do
Wanted
that.
to do that because she had all the U.S. championships, and apparently the Australian would have even given her more potentials to win. But she gave it up a little bit because she had a son, so she had.
But
the
then
third.
she came back and started playing again.
And then she won more after childbirth. Didn't go to the Australian championships because her husband would not let her.
because it was too far. Oh, is there a quote?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She said, they didn't start to invite people down there and pay their expenses until I got married. And that was winter time and Will's vacation time. And I just never got to go. He threatened to divorce me if I went to Australia, so I never went. He had respiratory trouble and he wanted me to come to California with him. I thought I should be with him. That was that. So she stuck by her man. Stand by your
Not for long, though.
man. Until 1964 when she divorced him. And formed a life partnership with fellow player Margaret Varner Bloss.
So, the rumor was that she was sneaking Margaret too, or I like to call them Peggy and Margie, to keep them separate.
Which is Peggy?
Peggy's number one. Peggy DuPont. Peggy DuPont.
Okay.
And then Margaret. Margie is.
Okay. So we're
Bloss.
totally making this up. So
it's not made
it
up.
is. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
You don't know that. So that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But
so she would sneak
she
her in
actually-
and have
but-
trysts in that.
Yeah,
tunnel.
apparently that was a big tryst place
Yeah.
because people would be snuck in there
Yep.
into the house from the tennis courts for other reasons too, from what we understand.
Yes.
So
Scandal.
So that kind of relates back to what we found when we were doing our
Yes,
gust hunting.
yeah.
But anyway, Margie married this guy named Bloss. Bloss. And they
Which
had a son.
Which is funny. Okay, so they formed a partnership. They were partners in tennis, but then they became life partners.
Life
But then
partners.
she married a dude and had a kid.
Yes. So I'm not sure when they became life partners. It just said they became life partners. But I don't know whether that was after she had
Right.
they got married and had a child.
Was it simultaneous? Were they having a polyamorous relationship? Is
Yeah.
it a menage a trois? Like, what's going on?
So
We don't know. We need answers.
Margie had a kid. Her husband died.
Yes.
They got together, went to El Paso, Texas, because
Yeah.
that's where Bloss had a horse farm.
Horse farm. More horses.
So tennis and horses.
Yes.
But apparently Margie was involved in badminton and other
Yeah.
sports. But
She was badass bitch number 2.
yeah, she had her own thing.
Peggy
going
and
on.
Margie going full force on that.
So yeah, so
Yeah,
they
it
got
was great.
together. They had a farm down there, and
Yeah.
all kinds of things happened. So
And
they
they
lived
didn't-
in El Paso until they died, and they gave their horses names after tennis and racket sports. So I don't know what is.
Sir Squashington,
I don't know.
Pencilberry.
Badminton. I don't know.
To the horses, man. They have the
And
weirdest
in
names.
1996, they were ranked as the top 20 racehorse owners by
Hey.
Thoroughbred Times. Now, I've never read Thoroughbred Times. I don't know who else is on that list, but apparently they were named that.
So, and that's 1996.
1996, yes.
That's 90s going on here.
Yeah.
So we're rounding up to our time.
Her son, Lee, was born in the late 60s, born in 1971.
1971. Okay.
So that was that. Now we get to
Now we
John.
can go to Jean and her 4 kids.
Yes, Jean had 4 kids.
So this is our side quest to make it less boring, but this is really fascinating. Thanks for listening to part 1 of our Bellevue history. We will be dropping part 2 very, very soon. And that is where we get into Foxcatcher and some of the theories on what made him kill someone. We will also be diving into our slight evidence of Bellevue, our experience, and then a little bit of evidence. Also, keep an eye out for a video of our experience there. A little bit of evidence, but mostly you get to see what we did. Or maybe not necessarily see because it was dark. Thank you for listening. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Only Ghosts in the Building. Follow us on our Patreon, patreon.com/Only Ghosts in the Building, all one word. It's free to sign up and you can download this really cool app. You can listen to all of our episodes on that little app or on your browser. You can see all the evidence that we've collected. I put up videos. And if you want to help us, we have a $1 tier, or sign up for our $5 tier, which I will be posting exclusive content and also video episodes, at least one a month. So go sign up. You can feel good about helping out a small grassroots business. We will see you soon.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.